Hi guys, let's continue with the topic of reductionism. I called it the new institutional economics reductionism because uh, new institutional economics is not a determinism because it accepted, the bounded rationality and also the knowledge, the change for institutions. Although, as I will come later, that they emphasize the stability of institutions. But so let's say that last time I also started by saying that compare the Douglas North and AJR. I believe that noise is more open to the other variables, but for AGR, it's basically just a simple regression model. If you are doing research, you know what I'm talking about. In statistics, or econometrics, simple regression means that there's just two variables. One is on the left hand side, another is in the right hand side. So basically, on the left hand side, we have economic growth. Okay, that's the dependent variable. On the right hand side, we have one independent variable that is the institutions, of course, according to NIE, right? So basically, if you look at from a distance, then you see that all these scholars, NIE scholars, are trying to do in their theorization process is that to justify that putting only one independent variable or regressor on the right hand side, which is institutions. Okay, they basically saying that they want to make this institution different. They believe they're different from others. For example, the accumulation of factor accumulations, human resources, and investment, productivity, technologies, innovations, all this together, trade, those kind of things. They basically says these factors are just they are part of they are what defining growth, but not the causes of growth. So what is the cause of growth? Institutions. Okay. On this point, North and AJR they agree, but I would say, especially later on in North, before we know that North passed away in 2015, and towards the latest year in his academic life, he started talking about beliefs, talking about mental models, those kind of things. I think that to that extent, North is more open. I won't be surprised if North says that, well, on the right hand side, not just the institutions, but we can add some, beliefs, mental models, stuff like that, to make it a multiple regression, but still not as they're not the same as the simultaneous equation model SEMs. Okay, that which is really the way it should be. Just like price and the quantity. Those are famous example. The price and the quantity, they are mutually influence each other. So you need simultaneous equations. Otherwise, you have a OIS bias if you're doing the ordinary least square, and you have a bias. You get into uh, not just a bias but an inconsistency. Even when the sample size increase, the bias will exist. It won't go away. So to that extent, that the HAR is more basically says that they push that the reductionism to an extreme. That's why, to that extent, I really think that they did a disservice for the academic field. They pull us back from a north to a more extreme version of reductionism. That's what I think that I have a serious conservation, um, preservation, whatever, with their thinking. So let's go back to the key point that what they are saying about institutions what make institutions such a magic, such a super regressors, super independent variable that we can allow them to put a to do such a simple regression. By the way, that regardless that they how hard they try to make, to prove, to demonstrate, to argue for the complexity, for the power, explaining power of institutions, the model remain a simple regression model. That's what all the trouble started. That's what the same thing. This difficulty with the NIE is self-inflicted. Just like Trump is, you know, self-inflict all the troubles that for the U.S. economy and for the world, it's a self-inflicted. There's nobody forced Trump to do that. Similarly, nobody forced the NIE scholars to do that, to limit it to a one independent variable. So those are the things that I want to talk more. But let's say that there are several points that I would argue that later on. But let's say today just focus on one thing. That is the something I called fault equilibrium. What is the fault equilibrium? Meaning that you have to fight to reach equilibrium. The only thing not changing is changing itself. It's a constantly dynamic. So that's actually the lesson that we learned from the first 100 days of Trump's administration. It's that it really taught us that democracy is a fault equilibrium. Institutions are fault equilibrium, and everything is basically politics. In the domestic politics, is a fault equilibrium, meaning that you have to fight. Okay, the different sides, different parties, and you may have a push, I may have a pull, and you may have a one direction, I may have a counter direction. You may have a one argument, I may have a counter argument. So adding this together. So everything is to be fought. That's what I call fought equilibrium. Okay, that's the biggest lesson. So the institution, the same thing. So in the what we learned from the Trump 100 days of Trump administration is that institution, after all, is not that stable. The stability of an institution is an illusion. Okay, but that's exactly what the NIE scholars doing, especially AJR. They're saying that they acknowledge that the people are fighting, there's a social conflict, but they believe that because the commitment problem, once you have the institutions, once you put it, for example, the best example, their favorite example is the Glorious Revolution in England. Once you have the Glorious Revolution, and then boom, you put everything into into the law, and then things are settled, and then that's it. Okay, but surprisingly to them, it's that it's a constantly, it's never simple, never stopped. Once you have an institution, it never stopped there because the institution itself is subjected to changes, subjected to dynamic, to the to the the fight and to the constant fight. Okay. So those are the things that this kind of thing. It's harder for you to see it if you only look at the history. If you only look at the 17th centuries England, or if you only look at the Glorious Revolution, and then if you only look at the colonial origin of the development, and then everything is like that. That's why we call it, telescopic bias or hindsight bias, because you believe that just because history uh, worked that way, developed that way, and then make you think that those are the only thing that possible. No, that's not it. That's not the case. Okay, so that's what we see when you combine the history and today, then you see that it's not that the institution is not the end of the world. It's just like remember the Fukuyama, his famous book at the end of history of the last man. He wrote another article lately saying the end of history. I wasn't aware when I was, when I had an idea, I always, go to the, Google Gemini's or ChatGPT's. I like Google Gemini because there's no limitation. ChatGPT have a limitation. It is only several questions that you can ask. So I use Gemini's all the time. And then I found out that there's a article that published by Fukuyama. But basically, all these people, they tend to believe that there will be a one thing, historical solutions, and surprisingly, they always. So let's stop here.